approach this, and I applied it to every single meter as we moved downstream, these different cross sections, and estimated there were 4.8 million mussels that were actually there. So, so I subtract what's there from what I predict would be in this entire system, and it gives me about 4.6 million mussels that aren't in this system because of the cold water is inhibiting them from being there. I tried as best as I could to apply this to the west branch of the Delaware, and when I did that, I came up with about 3.5 million mussels that could be living in that 18 miles of stream where there are currently no mussels. All right, thinking about filtration rate, fortunately, some folks just downstream of us in Pennsylvania and Delaware did some great field studies where they figured some of these things out. So the first thing to note is they did this with eastern elliptio, which is really our workhorse, our ecosystem workhorse in the Delaware River system. So they developed some weight-specific clearance rates, which clearance rate is just the liters of water that would pass through a mussel in an hour per dry weight, right? So it's scaled to the weight of the mussel. Filtration rate is the actual amount of stuff, suspended particles in milligrams that gets removed from the water for the dry weight of the mussel. And then the other thing is we know that this varies seasonally, right? Temperature has a really large impact on how these organisms are feeding. All right, so in the paper that they had some really nice tables from 4 different sites. All I did was from these clearance values at each site, I took the average so that I could say in spring, summer, fall, winter, that these were the varying rates depending on how warm it was, right? So I could just split these. I just did 4 even blocks throughout the year, right? And sorry if I didn't say, I am trying to get at a year-long level of how much ecosystem services would be or filtration would be. The last thing that I needed was some measure of how much dry mass is out there. And so luckily my friend Carla Atkinson published a paper where she had dry tissue mass versus the shell length for the Neversink River. So I just used those values. And I'll be honest, just for simplicity's sake, I said, you know what? An average mussel is about 1 gram of dry tissue mass. And that's the value that I'm going to apply to my, in my calculation. So I ran this through, and what I came up with is 8 billion gallons of water per year would pass through the mussels if they were there, right? These are the missing mussels in the East Branch, removing 132 tons of suspended sediments per year, right? If they were there. This is the service that's lost. Similar really high values over here on the West Branch of how much services they could provide. Okay, the next thing I want to note, right? When I'm talking about sediments removed, they're not actually being removed from the system, they're being translocated. So I just want to be clear about that. And to think about the pathway of these suspended particles is actually going into things like mussel growth, right? It's going into the tissue of these mussels, which becomes an important part of the food webs in these ecosystems. And then we have our biodeposits, which end up being food sources for invertebrates, fish, bacteria. Freshwater mussels are also, contributing soluble N and P, which helps fuels local food webs. They have sediment mixing, and they're also important physical structure in these ecosystems. And so here we have this really important ecosystem engineer that it's not just filtering the water, it's doing all of these other important things that helps maintain maintains the functioning of these aquatic ecosystems. All right, so the last thing I wanted to do is think about what is this actually worth? Because I wanted to put a dollar value to that, right? Because money talks, and that gives us something to compare it to. But I looked, and there's really almost no information on what is the value of a freshwater mussels filtration service. And we can maybe get to this from the other end of what a water manager pays to remove suspended particles, but I didn't actually figure that out. So I'll be honest, part of what I wanted to do was to think about what's in the balance here, right? On one side of this is the freshwater mussels and the ecosystem services they provide. What's on the other side of this balance? Brown trout, probably, is what's on the other side of this balance. And so I really was hoping to compare, right? There's a great study in 2018 that actually looked at the economic impact of the fisheries on this system. And so I don't have numbers to compare, which is probably good. Mussels probably would have lost, right? Because these are really, these are really staggering numbers of the millions of dollars that this fishery contributes to these local communities, right? And this is really important information. Okay, so the changing environment, and I think the thing I wanted to say is that, right, my little filtration exercise here, it's just a back of the envelope calculation, right? We could poke lots of holes in that, and there are ways to improve it and make it more dynamic. And do I actually believe that there's 4.8 million mussels exactly missing in the East Branch of the Delaware? Probably not, right? But what I do believe is it's probably about the right order of magnitude, that when we think about the 45 miles across these 3 rivers that are uninhabitable for mussels, there could probably be millions of mussels in there doing important filtration work. But what I really wanted to do with that exercise is just to have us think more about what do we want from our rivers? And actually, what is the potential for our rivers? What is the potential for our rivers to provide, to be more resilient and to be more biodiverse and to be healthier for the humans and the wildlife that live in these systems. All right, and then the last thing I want to say is that I think a bunch of what this data is pointing to, our species of greatest conservation need really don't appear to be doing very well in all of this cold water, right? And so the outlook is going to be pretty bleak for these species if something doesn't change about the flows and some of the temperatures in these ecosystems. And with that, I had a bunch of great field crew members. We had a lot of fun out there. I've got a lot of great collaborators in this process. All right, thank you.